In a dystopian future where crime and corruption are rampant, one creation rose above to become a symbol of justice and technological marvel. From the crime-ridden streets of old Detroit, a hero was born, not of flesh and blood, but of steel and circuitry. This is the story of RoboCop. Released in 1987, the film RoboCop not only captured the imagination of moviegoers, but also spawned a series of video games that thrust players into the metallic suit of the law-enforcing cyborg. These games, like their film counterpart, blended action with a unique narrative, each cartridge and disc offering a chance to walk the fine line between man and machine. Today, we'll dive into the story of RoboCop, looking into the creation of the robotic police officer himself. Then, we'll take a look at all of RoboCop's video game adaptations, examining how this film icon was translated into a digital hero. So stick around and join us as we question what it means to be human on today's trip down memory card lane. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I hope these words find you well. Hello and welcome to the 199th episode of our video game history podcast, A Trip Down Memory Card Lane. Each week, we'll tell you a story relevant to the current week in gaming history. It can be about a game or the people that have created it. It can be about a console or the technology that brought it to life. We often talk about all of the companies that bring it together, making our hobby of video games a reality. While telling you each story, we hope to teach you something new about the topic, what it took from the world as its inspiration, or what it gave back to the world in its legacy. Today, we are diving into the digital and metallic world of RoboCop, the movie and its game adaptations that brought a futuristic law enforcement hero into our homes and arcades. These games attempted to capture the essence of RoboCop's battle against crime and corruption in a dystopian future. I'm David Casson, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, who's always on duty to serve and protect the fun in our gaming histories. He's my brother, Rob Casson. Rob, before we dive into RoboCop's pixelated patrol on crime, have you ever thought about what your prime directive would be if you were a cybernetic police officer?
To stop crime.
That seems way too obvious, doesn't it?
I mean, you'd think, but you still ask the question.
I did still ask the question. Are you familiar with RoboCop at all?
I have familiarity with RoboCop, Dave.
Familiar with RoboCop. So, what is RoboCop's number one prime directive?
Couldn't tell you that one, Dave. Sarah Connor.
Do you know? That's not RoboCop. That's not RoboCop at all. What the hell? Do you know any of his prime directives?
No, I do not.
Serve the public trust. That's number one. Protect the innocent is number two. And uphold the law is number three. There's also a fourth one. If he tries to arrest anyone, any of the senior officers in the company that made him, he shuts down. That's his fourth prime directive, but
that seems reasonable.
Serve the public trust, though. That's a good one.
It is, yeah. You know.
Yeah. And you just want to uphold crime or fight crime. What did you say? Fight crime?
Stop crime.
Stop crime? Stop crime is good enough. I'll take it. That's uphold the law. That's number three.
It's close enough, you know.
It's close enough. You did good. You did good.
1 for 3, baby.
Hey, we're looking for those odds most of the time when we play just about any game. So, I mean,
you got that right. I'll take a 1 in 3 shot.
Exactly. Well, before we dive into the story of RoboCop, what else has happened during this week in gaming history?
Well, on June 22nd, 1979, Infocom was founded by a group of MIT staff and students. Known for text-based adventure games, Infocom made significant contributions to early computer gaming with a focus on story quality and puzzle complexity that set the standard for the genre. Among their most famous titles, is Zork, a game originally developed in the late 1970s and released commercially by Infocom in 1980. Zork and subsequent titles like The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and Planetfall were notable for their deep narratives, clever wordplay, and the absence of graphics, relying purely on text and the player's imagination. Infocom's games were powered by their proprietary Z Machine interpreter, which allowed their software to run on a wide array of computers with minimal modification. This technological innovation was crucial during a time when the personal computer market was highly fragmented. And despite the eventual decline of text based adventures in favor of graphically driven games, Infocom's legacy continues to influence the development of interactive fiction and narrative design in gaming. And we covered Infocom's history back in episode 177, so go check it out.
We did. That was a really fascinating story. I really enjoyed doing that episode. Highly recommended.
Yeah, go listen to it in 42. On June 17th, 1988, Blaster Master was released for the Nintendo Entertainment System, developed by Sunsoft. This game quickly became known for its unique blend of gameplay styles, combining side scrolling platforming with top down shooting elements. Players took on the role of Jason, a young boy who chases his pet frog Fred down a radioactive hole and finds a battle tank called Sophia. The game's narrative leads Jason through a series of underground levels where he must navigate and combat enemies both in and out of his tank. Blaster Master was lauded for its smooth gameplay mechanics, compelling level design, and the seamless transition between vehicle combat and on foot exploration. These features, along with its challenging gameplay and engaging story, made it a standout title on the NES. Over the years, Blaster Master has retained a cult following and has seen several sequels and reboots, highlighting its enduring appeal and impact on the gaming community.
Did you ever get a chance to play Blaster Master?
No, can't say that I have, Dave. Was that one of your favorites? Were
No.
you a master Blaster Master?
No, but it was a fun game.
Was not familiar with that one. On June 19th, 1992, Treasure Co. Limited was formed, establishing itself as a distinguished video game developer known for its innovation and creativity. Founded by former employees of Konami who wanted to focus on creating original and unique games rather than continuing with sequels of existing franchises, Treasure quickly gained a reputation for its high quality, visually impressive games that often push the boundaries of existing gaming hardware. The Tokyo based studio first made waves with its release of Gunstar Heroes for the Sega Genesis in 1993, a game celebrated for its fast paced action and cooperative gameplay. Treasure's commitment to unique game design, philosophies, and challenging conventions has given it a cult status among gamers, with a portfolio that includes other critically acclaimed titles like Radiant Silvergun and Ikaruga. And we learned about Treasure during a few episodes, as early back as episode 33 with Ikaruga itself. So go give it a listen.
Yes, give it a listen. Treasure. What else has Treasure done? Treasure's part of Pokemon.
Yeah. I can't remember anything else, though. I was just thinking Ikaruga was a hard game.
It was a hard game. All right, moving on.
On June 2000, Microsoft made a significant move in the gaming industry by acquiring Bungie, a well known game development studio. This acquisition was pivotal for Microsoft as it sought to bolster its gaming portfolio ahead of the launch of its first gaming console, the Xbox. Bungie, at that time, was developing what would become Halo Combat Evolve, which later launched as a flagship title for the Xbox and immensely contributed to the console's early success. Halo's innovative design, engaging story, and groundbreaking multiplayer capabilities set a new standard for first person shooters and helped establish Xbox as a major player in the console market. The acquisition of Bungie not only provided Microsoft with a talented development team, but also a beloved franchise that would go on to become a cornerstone of Xbox's identity. We learned about the history of Bungie during our episode on Halo, which was episode 168. So cue that up if you'd like to learn more.
Yeah, cue that up. Learn all about Halo and how it was originally going to be a real time strategy game.
Well, it did end up becoming one still.
In a manner of speaking, yes.
I mean, I would argue, yeah, there were two of them.
Very true. I'll give you that.
Mm-hmm. They went back to their roots.
They did indeed.
On June 21st, 2005, Battlefield 2 was released, marking a significant advancement in the Battlefield series by DICE. This installment brought the franchise into the modern era, setting aside the World War II theme of previous entries for contemporary warfare. Battlefield 2 enhanced the series' hallmark large scale multiplayer battles, supporting up to 64 players on a single map. It introduced new gameplay mechanics, such as the commander role and squad system, which allowed for more strategic depth and team coordination. The game also featured a wide array of modern military vehicles and weaponry, along with highly detailed environments. Praised for its realistic combat dynamics and innovative multiplayer design, Battlefield 2 was a critical and commercial success, helping to shape the future of online shooters with its emphasis on teamwork and tactics. And it was a fantastic game.
I was just waiting for you to follow up because that is so your cup of tea.
Oh, absolutely. The amount of time that I spent playing Battlefield 2 was only surpassed by Battlefield 3.
I know. That's your jam there.
Fantastic games.
Mm-hmm.
And last up, on June 16th, 2011, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D was released for the Nintendo 3DS, revitalizing one of the most celebrated video games of all time with updated graphics and 3D visuals. Developed by Nintendo in collaboration with Grezzo, this remake brought the classic adventure of Link in the Land of Hyrule to a new generation of gamers, enhancing the experience with the handheld's 3D capabilities without the need for special glasses. The game retains the original's beloved gameplay, storyline, and music, but adds several new features, including a revamped inventory system, the use of the gyroscopic technology for aiming, and improved graphics that offer players a richer visual experience. Ocarina of Time 3D was both critically acclaimed and warmly received by fans, serving as a benchmark for how to update a classic game while preserving the essence of what made it memorable. We talked about the Ocarina of Time way back in episode 13 when we were more topical based, so if you'd like to learn more about why Ocarina has withstood the test of time, give it a listen.
Yeah, give it a listen.
And much like back in that episode, I still haven't finished that game. So, it's a rough one. I'm sorry, buddy Kiefer. I'll get it back to you one of these days. But you know who did finish their game, Dave?
Are you sure about that?
I guess I'm not.
Good segue though. Proud of you.
Yeah, I try.
So Edward Neumeier started his Hollywood journey as a production. Man, I'm off to a great start. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 words in. That's great. I'm gonna leave that in there. He was a production assistant on the TV series Taxi. You know Taxi, Rob, at all?
Isn't that the movie with Queen Latifah?
Uh, is it though? Is it? Did I? It's very possible that what you're saying is true, and I don't know it. Was there actually a Queen Latifah movie with called Taxi?
With Jimmy Fallon.
I have no clue, but I'm sure I believe
Oh
you.
man, Dave, you gotta check that out.
Okay,
She drives a souped up badass taxi.
this is a TV series. It's a TV series that, in particular, since the internet loves him, made Danny DeVito famous. Edward later became a scriptwriter, which landed him a job with Columbia Pictures. And there, his claim to fame was that he fought to get the movie Risky Business produced. And when it was produced and became an unexpected success, he was promoted and got a job as a junior executive for the Universal Pictures Company. Now, his job, primarily as a junior executive, was story analysis, right? So they get scripts and they try to read scripts and analyze them and figure out what the next great big thing is going to be. One thing that you'll find about most story analysts is that pretty much all of them want to do anything other than be a story analyst. Neumeier had wanted to write an action script. He wanted to be a screenwriter. And he was particularly interested in science fiction. You know, Star Wars had come out when he was in college. This was, late 70s, early 80s. And in interviews, he noted that before that, he was a really big fan of Clint Eastwood action films. So Neumeier's office was a trailer, as most offices were for junior executives, and it was on the Warner Brothers backlot. And there he spent many, many nights reading scripts and watching movies get made. And then one day, they began to build a new world around him. He watched as a set was being built, a big science fiction movie, the likes of which he had never seen before. So they're shooting this movie at night, and at the end of Neumeier's workday, he had a normal 9 to 5 job. He would just walk over to the set and start working on the movie.
Nice.
As he put it in an interview, there were so many people, they didn't know whether or not you were actually working. So you could literally walk in there and just do something.
Oh, that's terrible.
This big science fiction movie is known as Blade Runner. Pretty darn famous sci-fi movie directed by Ridley Scott. Ironically enough, we just talked about Ridley Scott recently when we talked about Alien in our Giger episode. So Ridley Scott has come up fairly recently. That was recently, wasn't it?
I feel like it was,
Yeah,
but
I know that, but sometimes we go back and we look at old episodes and we find out it's episode 13 and we're like, ooh, that
yeah,
wasn't
no, I
recent.
feel like that was in the last at least dozen.
It was in the last month or so, roughly. So
No, so even less than a dozen. There you go.
I don't know for sure. I'm guessing. That's my guess, is it in the last month. I know it was recently. Anyways, in an interview, Neumeier said that he watched Ridley Scott direct 4 nights of Blade Runner, which was absolutely astounding to do. He also made garbage for the streets alongside the art department.
Oh, that must have been really hard. Oh, finish my banana. Better toss it out.
That's
Oh, on
right.
the ground.
Yep. Here's my wrapper, littered wrapper. On one of those nights, he watched them bring out a car in the movie. It's called a spinner, and he loved cars, so the spinner fascinated him to no end. And at that moment, he realized he was sitting in the middle of an atmosphere created by Ridley Scott, looking at a prop that Ridley Scott designed, and an idea came to him. Maybe it was the atmosphere, maybe it was the lack of sleep because he was basically working double shifts. But suddenly, RoboCop came into his head as a title, and he said he saw the character in this kind of bluish armor thing. He understood at that moment that he was a policeman who was also a robot, looking at what to him was a strange humid race. He was an AI asking itself, why are people the way they are? So he got an epiphany. He had a light bulb moment while working on Blade Runner, which he wasn't technically working on.
But don't say that part.
No, we don't talk about that. So he sat down and wrote roughly a 40-page outline of his movie. But he was still working as an executive and trying to figure out how to write a script at night. And as I said, he was a story analyst, so part of his job was researching story submissions, which had him also meeting people from film schools. And at one of the meetings, he met an aspiring director that was directing rock videos. And as part of their interview, that aspiring director says, hey, I'm directing a movie rock video, like a music video that has a robot in it. And Neumeier replied, hey, guess what? I've got an idea about a robot. And that's how he met his co-writer, Michael Miner. For about the next 2 months, they started talking about the idea collectively, kind of getting their ideas together. And then the subsequent 2 or 3 months after that, they spent their nights and their weekends writing the script together. Their first draft that they started shopping around in early 1985 was called RoboCop: The Future of Law Enforcement. After some rewrites and a few directors, because as you change directors, they don't, one director wants one tone, one director wants another tone. So they went through directors and rewrites. They found a director and they found a tone. Filming on what would later be known simply as RoboCop started in August of 1986 on an $11 million budget. It was released in theaters on July 17th, 1987, and frankly, it was a success. It ended up making $53 million on what was eventually a $14 million budget. So, by all means, a financial success. Maybe not quite by the scope of modern movies, but I mean, they made money. There are movies that don't even do that.
True. Very true.
Very, very, very true. Now, it got mixed reviews, right? It got mixed reviews at the time, but in hindsight, now it's kind of looked back as one of the best films of the 1980s to some people, and probably one of the best science fiction action films of the 80s. So if you don't know what RoboCop is, it is set in crime-ridden Detroit. I don't know why I put crime-ridden, because that's just Detroit.
Shots fired, Dave.
So it's set in Detroit in the near future. RoboCop centers on a police officer. His name is Alex Murphy, and he's murdered by a gang of criminals and then revived by a mega corporation called the Omni Consumer Products as a cyborg law enforcer called RoboCop. He is unaware of his former life, and basically RoboCop executes a campaign against crime. And as as he comes to terms with lingering fragments of his humanity, that's the whole movie's about. He starts to have dreams and bits and pieces, and his old life comes back to him, but he's also RoboCop. And it's, the story is essentially him getting revenge on all the people that wronged him. When he remembers, he gets revenge on all the people that wronged him, both the criminals and eventually the corporation, because of what they did to him. I actually watched it, Rob. I took the time to watch it this weekend.
Nice. How was it?
It was good. It was good. I don't know if I'd go as far to call it one of the best films of the 80s. Do I think it's a good science fiction / action film? I do. It was a good movie. I don't have any recollection of the movie. I mean, RoboCop came out when I was 3, so that's not surprising. And I don't really know RoboCop fans. So I sat down to watch it to have a reference point, and I enjoyed it. There's people that we know in it. Like, the main bad guy is Red from the 70s show, the old man from the 70s show.
Oh, neat.
He's young and a bad guy in this movie, which is just kind of weird to see. There's people. So but it's an enjoyable movie, and it's way more graphic than I remember. Like, way more graphic than I remember. It's actually a pretty gruesome movie at times. Like the way the police officer dies, and then some of the people that died during the movie is, I mean, one guy gets covered in toxic waste and melts, like Toxic Avenger type melting. It's pretty gruesome, actually.
Sounds pretty awesome, though.
It was. It was, but you don't expect it because you don't know, right? And 80s movies are a mixed bag. Some of them were like that, some of them weren't. So we went in not expecting that, and then that's what we get. And, we just kind of looked at one another like, what the heck is this? So it was an enjoyable movie. But yeah, so RoboCop just came to Edward Neumeier, in an epiphany while he was working on a movie he shouldn't have been on. And then he met a guy who was like, yo, I make music videos with robots in them. Oh, hey, I got a robot story for you. And then they just kind of made it happen.
Hey, there's always a story.
There is always a story. Just like RoboCop revolutionized the way we think about law enforcement and technology, you, dear listeners, can revolutionize the way you share your ideas with the world. Have you ever thought about creating your own podcast? Do you have interesting stories, insights, or just something fun that you want to share with the world but you don't know where to start? We've got the solution for you.
That's right, David. Our friends at Zencaster have created an all in one podcasting suite that makes it easier than ever to create, record, and distribute your podcast. With Zencaster, you can start recording high quality audio and video right from your web browser. No more complicated setups or expensive equipment needed.
Zencaster allows you to record up to 4K video with your guests, and their multi layered backups ensure that you always have the highest quality recordings, even if your internet connection isn't perfect. Plus, their post production process makes you sound buttery smooth by automatically removing all those filler words, awkward pauses, setting the podcast loudness, all this fun stuff. You can just, it's so easy to do. We highly recommend it.
And if you think podcasting requires tons of different tools and services, think again. Zencaster's all in one platform lets you do everything in one place, from recording to editing to distributing your podcast to all major platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more.
So, whether you're just starting out or maybe you're looking to take your podcast to the next level, Zencaster has got you covered. And for our part, we've got a special deal for our listeners. Go to zencaster.com/pricing and use our offer code MemoryCardLane, all one word, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencaster paid plan.
That's Zencaster, ZENCASTR.com/pricing. And use the code MemoryCardLane, all one word, for 30% off your first month. Start your podcasting journey today with Zencaster and share your voice with the world.
All right, let's dive back into the world of RoboCop. So, Ocean Software's development director, Rob, he was a movie buff. And Ocean Software has, at this point, even, and especially now, a reputation for licensed movie video games. And that was part of the reason why, because their development guy was a movie buff and he frequently sought out movie scripts with the intention of buying out their licensing rights to make a video game around them. So when he read through RoboCop, in it he saw a futuristic sci-fi action film with a Detroit cyborg cop out for revenge. And he knew that that combination would be the perfect material for a computer game. So he ripped off a sticky note, he stuck it on the front page of the script, and he scribbled, "We should get this, it could be a winner." And he passed it on. Ocean Software, for their part, did pick up the license for it. In an interview, he later elaborated and said, "As far as I was concerned, the material was ideal for a video game. There was science fiction, shooting, it had set pieces. Also, the movie itself was quite low budget, which in turn allowed us to negotiate a very preferential deal. I think the guarantee we paid for worldwide rights on all electronic formats was in the tens of thousands." In fact, I found another article that said it was 20,000. So they did not pay a lot for licensing rights on this game at all.
That ain't bad at all.
So they ended up with the license to RoboCop just based off the script. At this point, they did not know what the movie was beyond a script. They put it into production, the game, just as the movie was about to come out. And they had no idea whether or not the game was going to be a success. So it was really a gamble, right? If the movie flopped, theoretically they could stop production on it, and if the movie was a success, they could continue, production on it and potentially have a video game adaptation of a hit movie. During the process, they had also sub-licensed the arcade and pinball rights. They're called coin-op rights to another company, Data East. They had shared a close relationship with Data East. In fact, the president of Data East would become the president of Ocean a few years later. So it was a lot closer than anyone thought. Apparently, they were bouncing employees back and forth. And as part of that sublicensing agreement, they licensed the rights for them to convert the arcade versions back to the home computer and console versions. Are you following all that?
Not at all.
So they have the rights to RoboCop, and they license Data East. They sublicense to Data East, and Data East can make an arcade and a pinball version of the game. But they also license the rights to convert the arcade version of the game to a console version. Now you following?
Nope, still lost me, Dave.
Okay, cool. They capitalized on that like it's no one's business. Data East, for their part, developed a beat 'em up slash run and gun arcade cabinet. And Ocean Software used that cabinet as the basis for their own home computer version of RoboCop. They took the arcade cabinet and pretty much converted it over the consoles, but then added more content so the game was not an exact replica of the arcade original. Less work, right?
Yeah, totally.
There were versions made for just about everything as RoboCop got successful. The Commodore 64 got a version, the ZX Spectrum got a version, MS DOS, Apple II, Atari ST. Eventually, the NES and Game Boys got a version. Luckily for all parties, the movie ended up being a success. So, in turn, the arcade cabinet and all the ports of the game did very well too. There's some fun statistics in there. The arcade cabinet, RoboCop, was actually the highest grossing arcade cabinet for all of 1988 in Hong Kong. And it sat as number 2 in Japan for part of the year. So, I mean, in parts of the world, it was popular. I mean, it's Hong Kong.
Yeah, that's part of the world.
That's part of the world. Between all of its home ports, it ended up selling over 1 million copies worldwide. The ZX Spectrum version of RoboCop, the port, was actually the best selling home computer game for the entirety of the 1980s in the United Kingdom. So that's not bad.
No, I would say that that's decent.
Yeah. Best selling home computer game for the whole decade in the UK. Not bad.
That's pretty decent, you know. Probably it was surpassed not long after.
I think it came out in 88, so that doesn't say much for all the games made in the previous 8 years, but
Yeah, exactly. You know, it is what it is.
So, as one does with successful movies and video games, you keep making them, right? We've learned that time and time again, haven't we?
Oh, 100%.
I mean, whenever someone makes money, you got to make more money, no matter what the consequences are. So, a few years later in 1990, Robocop got a sequel, Robocop 2, written by Frank Miller, who is a well known American comic book writer and screenwriter. He's probably best known for creating Batman the Dark Knight. There are some movies that have his name on it, like the movie 300 and Frank Miller's Sin City. Really great movies. I don't. Do you know Frank Miller?
No, I do not. See part of the Miller Band?
Oh
That's
my god,
Steve.
the Steve Miller Band. That's great. Okay, I love Frank Miller. I'm a big fan of his art style. Sin City was fantastic. Everyone likes The Dark Knight. I mean, The Dark Knight made one of the best. Was turned into one of the best movie trilogies of the last, I would argue, 50 years. But
Yeah, definitely.
people are going to fight me on that one. But those three movies were an excellent trilogy.
I am in agreement with you.
300 was a good movie too. It gave us the This Is Sparta kick.
I never saw 1 through 299 though.
Oh my god. Well, we should have a marathon and watch through them.
Sure, Dave. I'll let you get right on that.
Thanks. So Ocean Software and Data East were again putting their hands all over video game versions of the movie. They turned to RoboCop 2 into a platform shooter. Data East made the arcade version. A company called Special FX made a version for the Amiga and Atari, while Ocean Software handled versions for the Commodore 64, the NES, and the Game Boy. In 1993, RoboCop welcomed a third movie into the franchise, once again with a screenplay written by Frank Miller. This one was not well received. In hindsight, it's pretty critically panned. People say that RoboCop got two sequels, one that's great and one that's crap. I did not get to watch this one. I downloaded it. I have it. I have 2 and 3 queued up, but I didn't have time to watch them. I'll let you know.
Okay.
Ocean Software, once again, was making a shoot 'em up platform game called RoboCop 3. They made it for the SNES. A company called Eden Entertainment Software ported that version over to various Sega consoles like the Master System and the Sega Genesis, while a company called Probe Software would have handled the port to the NES. Now, there is one more version of RoboCop 3 for the Amiga, Atari ST, and PC computers that was made by Digital Image Design. It has some gameplay variety. 5 different gameplay segments, Rob. You could drive.
Really?
You can drive. Awesome, right?
Ooh.
You can shoot enemies to rescue hostages. You can
Okay.
you can participate in hand-to-hand combat. You can fly a jetpack. And lastly, you can fight a robot ninja.
Uh, Interesting. Is it literally just called Robo Ninja?
I have no clue.
Ah, come on.
Now, on the film side of things, we did not see RoboCop again until they created a remake of RoboCop back in 2014, a decade ago. Did you see the remake at all?
No.
It had like Sam Jackson and who was RoboCop? Joel Kinnaman, I think. Had a bunch of people in it.
Wasn't that Star Wars?
Yes, that also has Sam Jackson in it. Good call. I mean, you're not wrong. I can't refute that in any way, shape, or form. You're not wrong. So, they made a film remake in 2014, but you should know that in the meantime, Rob, they continued making video games based on the RoboCop license. In between the 2 RoboCop movies, Frank Miller took his comic book skills and he wrote a 4-part comic book series called RoboCop versus the Terminator. In 1993, it was turned into a run and gun game that was released for the SNES, Sega Master System, Sega Genesis, as well as the Game Gear and Game Boy. So, RoboCop versus the Terminator. In 2001, another RoboCop game was slated to be released for the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance. Only the Game Boy Color version was released. It didn't do well, so the Game Boy Advance version was canceled before it was ever finished. So that's fun, huh?
A little bit.
Do you remember RoboCop versus the Terminator at all?
I did not know it was a thing.
Sounds like a pretty cool thing, huh?
I mean, it depends on your definition of cool.
You're hard to please.
So many jokes with that one, Dave. Just gonna leave it alone.
That's fantastic. In 2003, a first-person shooter simply named RoboCop was released for Windows, PlayStation 2, Xbox, and the GameCube. Here in North America, they actually only released it on the Xbox and never made it to North America on any of those other consoles, or platforms rather. Doesn't rate very well, like the 40s. Metacritic has it in the mid 40s, low to mid 40s. So it's generally a forgettable game, you know?
I mean, 40s aren't terrible.
No, the 40s are not terrible. And then we just don't see RoboCop on the consoles for quite a while, actually. But they kept making them. In 2004, yet another RoboCop game was found, literally called RoboCop, this time for mobile phones. It was a side-scrolling action platform game that IGN actually gave an 8.5 out of 10. Yay!
A little better than 40, huh?
A little bit better than 40. A little bit better. That'd be an 85 out of 100 for those of you following at home. And in 2014, when they when they did the remake of RoboCop, of course, they had to develop a video game tie-in, right? It was yet another mobile game, a free-to-play shooter game developed by Glue Mobile, and it was titled RoboCop: The Official Game. Although it was just a tie-in, it was supposed to be a tie-in to the movie. It's really just RoboCop fighting against holographic enemies and robots in a training simulation. And that was kind of it for RoboCop, Rob. I mean, have you played any of these RoboCop games?
Not a one, Dave.
Not a single one.
Nope.
And you've never seen a RoboCop movie.
I sure have not seen bits and pieces of it, but that's
Very
all.
true. I think we've all seen bits and pieces of it. That's fun stuff. So last year in 2023, we got a surprising addition to the RoboCop video game library with the release of RoboCop Rogue City. Rogue City is a first-person shooter that was developed by a Polish game developer called Teon and published by a French publisher, Nasson. It features an original storyline that was set between the second and third RoboCop movies. And although it has mostly new characters, RoboCop himself was actually voiced by Peter Weller, who is the same actor that played RoboCop in the original movie, which was a pleasant surprise for RoboCop fans. And this game was a risk, considering that it was admittedly the first console based RoboCop game since 2003. And frankly, 20 years is a long time for a franchise to sit dormant. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But they tried. They released it for PlayStation 5, Windows, and Xbox Series X/X. I don't know. I just call them the Xbox Series consoles. And truth be told, it has received pretty favorable reviews. In fact, IGN called it the most. Now I'm freaking Mike Tyson up in here. IGN called it the most authentic adaptation the RoboCop series has ever seen. Fun, huh?
that's more than I would have thought.
Do you know anyone that played it?
No.
Was it even on your radar?
Yeah, Dave, I don't know anyone who knows. I mean, honestly, to be fair, I don't even know if any of my friends, with the exception of probably one, has even seen RoboCop. It's just not something that I feel most of us have been interested in.
By the time you guys came along, there was no RoboCop to be had. It was an afterthought.
Yeah, it was all about the Terminator.
That's actually kind of true, right? Because the third RoboCop movie was 1993, and y'all came a little bit after that, and there wasn't another RoboCop movie until 2014. So that's actually the truth. Like your formative years, there was no RoboCop.
Yeah, no, that there was not. So
I guess it's kind of like lost on your generation, then, huh?
I would definitely say so. And that's just the games were the kind of following that. You don't have interest in the series, you probably don't have much interest in the game.
Well, you're missing out.
Plus, it sounds like most of them are just kind of point and shoot, and
Yeah, we don't do that.
not unless it's like at the arcade.
Well, it was a good gamble for its publisher. It ended up being their best video game launch ever. So there you go.
Their biggest ever.
Their biggest ever. Yeah.
And how big was that, Dave?
I have no clue. But, it was their biggest ever.
Well, I mean, that's not saying much if it was like 10 and their next one was 5. So, biggest ever definitely needs to have something behind it to make it seem reasonable.
Yeah, make it seem reasonable. So as for RoboCop, Rob, you should know there's always talk about a new one. I mean, if you look at the Wikipedia entry on RoboCop, there's always a new project that gets assigned to a famous director, not so famous director, and then it gets canceled and moved to another director, and then so on and so forth. They've been working on I mean, there have been other RoboCops. There has been um, 2 TV shows and 2 animated series, like in the 90s into 2000s. A Canadian television production company made 2 different like live version RoboCop series. One's called RoboCop Prime Directives. That's the most recent one. I think it was like early 2000s is when it came out. It's not like there hasn't been any RoboCop in between there. There just hasn't been anything since they remade that movie in 2014. But there is talk about a new one. Some announcement for another movie in the series, or another one that says it's going to ignore all the other movies. I doubt that the 2014 remake's the last we're ever going to see of RoboCop. Like, it's been 10 years. They should give us another one already.
Yeah, sure, Dave. That probably would be
Probably be good. Be nice.
probably, modern day graphics and animations and whatnot and special effects.
That is very true. The special effects in the first one were rough. Very
Ugh,
rough.
I can imagine it.
The murder stuff was really cool, but he fights this giant robot. It's called ED-209, and they did it with puppets and stop motion, and it's very jarring. Like it's very stop motion. It's humorous, to be honest with you. I Neumeier is attached to one of the current RoboCop projects, so when we have another one, we'll have one of the original writers on it. He hasn't done much. You may well know the other movie he's known for, which is Starship Troopers, which I'm a huge fan of Starship Troopers.
Are you? Well, I wouldn't know that.
I right? Crazy. He
I prefer
actually
the super variant.
you did. He actually teamed up again with the director of RoboCop to make Starship Troopers. That was both Edward Neumeier and Paul Verhoeven. So they did both movies together. But like I said, he's still attached to his project. He's still trying to support his baby, RoboCop. That's fun, right?
Robo Baby Cop.
Robo Baby Cop. And I think the fact that we got a good game based on RoboCop is promising. I don't know if RoboCop would have made the difference. It's probably just a good video game with a RoboCop license, but still, it's promising that there is a RoboCop game out there that's actually good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's. I guess there's not a whole lot of movies that are just movies, like obviously like superheroes and things aside, that you can create a game out of and that actually be a good game. So it is pretty cool to know that.
But that's it. That's RoboCop. That's RoboCop from its early beginnings as a Blade Runner idea to the silver screen to the home computer,
All from not working on set.
all from working on a movie you're not supposed to be working on. Fun times. There's a lot of history, a lot of other episodes that we referenced in the beginning, like Battlefield and Zelda and our treasure episode and our Zork episode. And of course, if you want to check out any of our old episodes, you can do so by going to our website, which is www.memorykardlane.com. And Rob, what else can people do on our website?
Well, you can find an archive of our old episodes. You can find a calendar of our upcoming episodes, see what topics we're going to be talking about, as opposed to what we've already talked about. You can find a link to our Discord where you can come talk with Dave and I about, games or maybe some of these movies. Tell them how The Dark Knight wasn't really a great trilogy, even though it is, and you're wrong. But, come and argue that with us. You can find a link to our Patreon where you can help support us, get access to ad-free and unedited versions of our episodes, hear all the little Freudian slips that Dave likes to throw out in every single episode. And you can also find links to our social medias where I am on several platforms as Rob_O_Raptor and Dave.
I can be found on various platforms as David is wrong. Each week, we're going to tell you one story relevant to the current week in gaming history. It can be about a game, a console, technology, a person, a company. I just find one topic that's relevant to this week and I roll with it. Every week when I sit down to do my research, what I like to do is find things that I didn't know about the topic, because if I didn't know them, I can learn them and teach them to other people, because I assume you don't know them either. That's why you come every week, right? Because you don't know things. So, in celebration of that cycle of learning, teaching, we like to go around table and talk about our takeaways. So, Rob, what did you learn today?
I learned all about the fact there were RoboCop video games, Dave.
You didn't know
But
there was a single one.
I'm sure that I've seen the one for the NES or something once before, but obviously it's never something I played. But I mean, we talked about there being on the Commodore, the ZX Spectrum, MS DOS, Apple II, the Atari, and the Game Boy. Like, I've seen all of those consoles and looked at a lot of lots and things, just old gaming tech, because I think it's interesting. And if I ever find a good deal, I'm sure I'll pick them up. And in all of that, RoboCop's never been part of it.
No, not for you.
Yeah, no, it completely is just, it's not something I've ever seen. And to know that there were over 1 million copies sold of those games and somehow I've just never even seen one of them is kind of crazy when you think about it.
It's very true. But that's okay. I mean, it's not. There have been lots of other things that have flown under radar. Sometimes that's just the way it is. And like I said, timing wise, I'm not surprised it's a big gap for you in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I'll give you that. But still, it's I've seen a lot of the other games we've talked about, at least seen them in passing or seen something about them, but this one just. I know the movie, obviously, mostly because it's set in Detroit and being in proximity, you kind of get to know it.
It's set in Detroit, but it's not filmed in Detroit. So like
Right.
it's you watch it and it's so obvious, right? It's just so obvious. I mean, everything everywhere they go, you're like, that's not in Detroit. That's not in Detroit. That's not Detroit. In fact, the only footage I think is of Detroit is there's an overhead shot over the city to start the movie, and I think that's the
So,
only.
yep. One section of B roll.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the rest of the movie was filmed in Dallas, if I'm not, or Houston, somewhere in Texas, if I remember correctly. But yeah, and it's just weird. It's weird because, like I said, like I don't know that building. I don't know that building. I don't know that building.
Well, that's it for me, Dave. What is your big takeaway from this week?
I enjoyed the fact that he had this movie come to him as an epiphany while he was working on a movie he wasn't supposed to be on. Sneaking into a movie set is genius and clever and one of those really fun stories that it's just one of those really fun stories that deserves to be told. You know, dude worked alongside Ridley or watched Ridley Scott work for 4 days. Wasn't supposed to be there. Was there for 4 days. I don't know if you could get away with that kind of stuff anymore. You know. So,
Yeah, it'd be a lot harder now, that's for sure.
but I think that's a lot of fun. I think that's a lot of fun. But yeah, that's it. That's RoboCop. A little bit of history on the movie, a little bit of history on the video games. Quick run through. Thought it'd be fun to try something different today. Yeah, it was okay. So I wish there was more. That's the thing when you do kind of obscure things is that I wish that there was more. Like the video games, like literally the mobile video games, like you can find a video of them and like a blurb. Like that's about it. Like there's just not much about them or how they came to be or anything like that, you know? In fact, I was thrilled when I found that story about how Ocean came to license the game before like that was thrilling. That's my number 2 takeaway. So anyway.
No,
All
I
right,
think
Rob.
both are good.
Well, before I take it into next week, is there anything else you'd like to add to today's episode?
Well, as always, I want to take one quick moment to say thank you so much to everyone for listening. It means a lot to us, and we hope that you enjoy.
Yes, we do. Well, friends, that wraps up our cybernetic dive into the world of RoboCop. We've patrolled the streets of its game adaptations, explored its unique blend of action and storytelling, and reminisced about the impact of RoboCop in our lives, which is like I had a fun weekend and Rob didn't. That's what we got, right?
Yep, that's it, Dave.
We hope you enjoyed. That was insightful. You know, we hope you enjoyed as much as we did. But I want you to hold on to your controllers because next week is a landmark episode, is it not? It's a landmark. We are shifting gears from the dystopian future of RoboCop to the vibrant, groundbreaking world of Super Mario 64. It's our 200th episode. And on top of celebrating 200 episodes, we're going to take a look at Super Mario 64. Released in 1996, it revolutionized the platforming genre with its innovative 3D gameplay and unforgettable levels. We'll uncover the story behind its creation, delve into some of the game's pioneering mechanics, and discuss its legacy in the world of video games. I know I plan on bringing a guest. Rob, you bringing someone?
I guess we'll have to leave it up for a surprise, Dave.
I guess we'll have to leave it up for a surprise. Got to bring some fun for 200. So if you're ready to jump into the Mushroom Kingdom and explore one of Nintendo's most beloved titles, join us again next week for another thrilling trip down memory card lane. Do the thing.
Scooby doo bop 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 doo